Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. We'd like to thank you for being a part of our Sunday school this morning. We pray that you enjoy the lesson entitled Justice Triumphs Over Injustice, coming from the book of Habakkuk, chapter 2, verses 6 through 14. We pray that you enjoy the study this morning.
Thank you, Sister Harris. All right, so this story actually reminds me of one of my friends who recently was laid off from a job, and she was going to get paid for, I want to say 17 weeks, so she would have gotten paid for several months after her end date, and less than 3 weeks of being off, she got another job, and she did not even look for the job. The job came to her. Someone else called her that used to work with her and knew she needed a job, and told the people that he was currently working for that he knew her. She was a great worker, and he could vouch for her. And they had a phone interview that day, and she got the job immediately. So, a lot of times when things don't seem to be working out, that's when God's working behind the scene, and we don't understand sometimes the things that happen or why they happen. In her case, this was not necessarily an injustice. It was a large layoff at work, and she just was caught up in that. But still the same thing, It was not an injustice. It was just a act of a layoff, but still, God worked it out for her. She didn't even get a chance to worry about the situation. It was already worked out before she even got a chance to worry. So, but in this story, he did the same thing. They unjustly fired her for, the wrong reason, or got rid of her. And we probably all can attest to situations where this has happened, where people hold positions and they're not being fair or good in their position, but they're going to get rid of the people who are good workers and who are, doing what they should do. But even when that happens, we still have to trust God on it. We have to trust that He's going to do what's best. He's going to work it out for us. And it's, good to see that before her severance was over, she got another job, didn't she? All right, what are your comments about our In Focus story? The old saying goes, be careful of the ditch you dig, because, the ditch you digging for me might be for you. You might fall in that ditch. So we really have to, as Christians, as followers of Christ, we have to make sure that we're not committing these acts of injustice And, so many people in our workplace claim to be Christian. Managers, bosses, owners of the company, they claim to be Christians, but they will do dirty and underhanded things, injustice. They'll have to answer to that, won't they? Yeah. Huh? President? Yes, presidents. Okay. Any other comments about the story? So we have to have patience and wait on God, don't we? And I am the world's worst for being impatient. I'm so impatient. But, sometimes I find myself saying, why am I stuck here? Why is this happening like this? And I can't rush to get done what I'm trying to get done. And then later on to find out that pause that God threw in there for me probably saved me from something else or kept something bad from happening. So we have to, be patient. And I have to learn that. I'm still learning patience. In the story, one other thing that stood out to me was when Denise was talking to her friend. She was complaining basically about what had happened. And her friend Cheryl told her what? Do you think God doesn't know all of this already? He already knew, didn't he? He knows. So sometimes we just have to be reminded that while we're complaining about stuff, God already knows. He's already got it under control. So we should just stop worrying about it, can't we? All right. Any other comments? About it and you watch these things happen, it does not seem fair, and it's not fair. It is unjust, and we often find ourselves saying, "Why God are they able to get away with this, and why can this person do that?" And it just seems like God's not doing anything, doesn't it? But we know better. Sometimes again we do have to have that reminder, but we do know better. God is in control, isn't he? That's right. When we see others prospering, we wonder how can they get over? How can they get so much so easy? And I'm struggling so hard, and I'm barely making it. And a lot of people, this deters them from coming to Christ. They see other people who are in the body of Christ struggling, and they say, I can make it better, staying out here in the world. And Honestly, maybe they could make it better materialistically, but spiritually they can't make it, can they? They're not really making it. They just getting along in the world better than some. Um, but it does sometimes hinder those people, and then sometimes it kind of hinders us Christians already too. But what we as Christians also need to remember is even though we may be trying, we may be coming to church, studying our Bible, praying, and doing all the things that appear to be right, we still are not worthy, are we? So we're not much more worthy than the person who's not doing those things. All right, any other comments? All right, we will move on to our scripture lesson. And before we begin, remind you guys that it's the women's class turn to do the review and Bible dedication. So if we could get volunteers for those. All right, our scripture lesson this morning is, again, Habakkuk, 2nd chapter, the 6th through the 14th verses. We have 3 outlines. The first is the power of the people, Habakkuk 2 and 6. The second is destroyed by their own devices, verses 6 through 11. And the third is God will get the glory, verses 12 through 14. All right, so a little background of the lesson. Actually, the book does a great job of our background, so we'll just try to summarize that a little bit. Habakkuk is one of the minor prophets due to the length of his book, and the book of Habakkuk is a prophecy, but the text is a back-to-back, back and forth conversation between God and the prophet Habakkuk. In chapter 1, the prophet questions God about why he does not hear his people's cries for help and does nothing to save them from the violence, the wrongdoing, and injustice in their land. God answered Habakkuk's question by letting him know that he is doing something. He wasn't just sitting there idle. He's doing something. God promised Habakkuk that he was going to raise up the Babylonians, who were cruel and wicked, but he was going to raise up this nation to execute his judgment on Judah. Habakkuk acknowledges the holiness and wisdom of God, but he then questions why God continues to allow the wickedness and injustice that the people of Jerusalem faced, the people of God faced in Jerusalem. So Habakkuk wanted to know why God was silent while the righteous seemed to be swallowed up, as we just said. It seems like the righteous just can't get ahead. After Habakkuk's second complaint, he states in Habakkuk 2 and 1 that he will wait to hear what answer God desires him to give to the believers. So then God responds in verse 2 with the well-known and often quoted text, "And the Lord answered me and said, write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it." This was God's instruction to Habakkuk so that he could ensure that everyone was able to hear the response from the Lord. And so our lesson picks up today at verse 6 of chapter 2. So now we'll ask a volunteer to stand and read our scripture text. Loudly. Thank you, Sister Horton. All right, so in our first outline, the power of the people, verse 6. So again, as we said in chapter 1, Habakkuk wants to know how long God will continue to allow the righteous to suffer and the ungodly to prosper. First it's important that we note that Habakkuk has this relationship with God, doesn't he? He has such a good relationship with God that he feels comfortable with going to God and asking him why, doesn't he? A lot of times people will say you can't question God, but you can't take your questions to God, can't you? No, and he has such a good relationship with him, he was comfortable with doing that. And this is a reminder to us that when we are in a right relationship with God, we can take our questions to God. He wants us to bring everything to him and lay them at his feet. So when we do have questions and wonders and doubts, we take them to him, don't we? Like Habakkuk did. All right. He didn't take these questions to God in a manner as if he was judging God. He took them to God in the sense that he wanted to gain understanding, and that's good. We all need to gain understanding, and we can only do that through God, because he wanted to know why God was allowing this, and we have these same questions, don't we? Right now, we want to know what's going on, don't we? How is God allowing what is currently going on in our country, isn't it? So when we ask God a question, we must be prepared for the answer that he gives us, don't we? It won't always be something that we want to hear. Sometimes God's going to tell us something, much like he gave the answer to Habakkuk in chapter 1. He told him that he would use the Babylonians to punish Judah. So when you ask God for something, be careful what you ask for, because you may not like the return on what you're going to get. So Habakkuk asked God another question. Why would he use a wicked nation to punish Judah? Why do you think he asked that question? Why do you think Habakkuk asked God why he used why he used the Chaldeans or the Babylonians to punish Judah? Who were the Babylonians? Can't really hear you, but they were wicked, right? So he asked this because in his mind, he's thinking, why would you use the Babylonians? Because they way worse than us. They way worse than Judah. Even the worst things that Judah had done couldn't compare to the bad and wicked things that the Babylonians did. So in Habakkuk's mind, he's wanting to know, why would you use them? Maybe he was thinking, use a less wicked nation than the Babylonians, because Judah is God's people, right? He said, so why would you use this wicked nation to punish your people? So that was Habakkuk's next question. And so this leads to another point that we should take from Habakkuk when questioning God, is that we must understand that God's answers are always going to be better than our answers, right? We see and judge things based on our knowledge and our understanding, and not based on omniscience, because God is omniscient, isn't he? He's all-knowing. So he already knows everything, and he sees all things. He knows and sees things that we can't even grasp, So we can't answer questions or fix problems or handle situations. God can. So we can't ask certain questions We don't comprehend things like he does, right? Because the Bible tells us his thoughts are not our thoughts. So we cannot even begin to think that we can understand God's answer. All right, so here in verse 6, God goes further to respond to Habakkuk's question. He says, why would he use a wicked nation like Judah? So in verse 3, just after the verse where God told him to write the vision and make it plain, God says that the vision is for a future time. And it describes, it's talking about the end time, at the end when he's going to bring this judgment. He tells Habakkuk that it may seem like it's slow, that it's progressing slowly, that his judgment's not coming fast enough, but he tells him to be patient. He says, wait, it will surely take place. And then in verses 4 and 5, God talks about the arrogant, the crooked, the wealthy, and the greedy, and how they have taken captive many nations and many people. And so the first part of verse 6 says, shall not all these take up a parable against him and a taunting proverb against him and say? So this part of this verse refers to a mocking poem or a satirical song. And in the second part of verse 6, we find the first woe in our lesson today. What does woe mean? It's a warning. It's a stern warning in it. A strict warning coming usually from God, that's meaning his divine punishment is on the way, doesn't it? So normally at that time, tauntings or mocking would come from the wicked toward the righteous. But when God finally punishes the wicked, it's going to be reversed. This verse is saying that woe, what's going to happen next is everything that you're doing is going to be reversed. So the wicked are going to feel God's wrath in the end, won't they? The first woe is directed at those who get wealthy and take things and build up their wealth and everything that they have based on taking things from people, other people, things that don't even belong to them. And, you know, we witness these kinds of things still today, don't we? You can witness this where banks will foreclose on houses, or rich people will come in and condemn land and buy it for cheap, you know, and people that own the land won't even get enough money to go somewhere else and buy another house or find another house, but they're already wealthy, so they're going to take this land and turn it into some huge commercial property and make millions more dollars on it and get richer, and leave the person that owned that land that they took it from, leave them poor still. So, you know, if they operated in fairness or justice, it wouldn't be bad, would it? If you're going to take somebody's land, at least give them fair value, give them enough money that they can go and find somewhere else to live or another place to put their business or whatever. Don't just strip it from them. But that's what God is saying here, that, you know, they have gotten wealthy. Woe to those of you who have gotten wealthy from taking things that don't belong to you. So we must be careful not to take things from people and leave them penniless. Any comments about our first outline? Not, we will move to our second outline. Destroyed by their own devices, verses 6 through 11. All right, so in verse 7, God says that, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them. So suddenly, here in this verse, what does suddenly mean? Quickly, right? Instantly. So God didn't answer Habakkuk as to when the judgment was going to come, did he? He didn't give a specific date or time frame, but he did say suddenly. So suddenly was to let him know that it was going to happen when they least expected, wasn't it? Quickly. No one was going to be looking for this. And so then the debtors were going to take action. Suddenly, they will turn on you, and they were going to end up taking everything that they had taken from the people, right? And it says, you stand trembling and helpless. So the righteous was suddenly gained, wouldn't it? Okay, it says, despoil the wicked. Those righteous are suddenly going to despoil the wicked. And this is to say, also suddenly goes back, well, in the verse it says that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee. So when you think about awakening, that means it's like something was asleep, right? Something was dormant. So God's going to wake this up out of this deep sleep, and it was going to shake them. And when something bites you, what does that feel like? Painful, isn't it? You feel it, don't you? So God's letting them know that they're going to feel this wrath. It's going to bite them. It's going to hurt them. And it says, thou shalt be for booties unto them. Who knows what booties is? So it refers to the spoils of war, or the property that was captured and that they took from the people during war. So when a city was captured, everything in that city that belonged to the people, it then became property of the nation that conquered them. And so then they would actually have these celebration type events where they would divide up the property and give away these people's things. So then verse 8 goes on to talk about the spoils. Says, because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee. What does God mean by because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee? What does he mean by that part of this verse? Right? Tables are turned, right? Instead of the righteous becoming spoil for the wicked would become spoil for the righteous. And what the Chaldeans did to others now was going to be the same form of punishment to them. Because the rest of that verse says that because of men's blood and for the violence of the land of the city and all that dwelled therein. So they didn't just take the stuff, did they? They ravaged the city. They violently took from these people. They killed and took lives and harmed people. So this would now be done to them as punishment, payback, retribution. All right, so then in verse 9, this is the second woe. It says, woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house. So this woe speaks to the wicked that coveted things. And this text in the Hebrew, speaking to violent taking of things that they wanted through unnecessary violence. And we see on TV currently the war in Ukraine, where they just came through, Russia came through and just violently destroyed Ukraine, killed people, took hostages, harmed women and children. That's unnecessary, isn't it? That's just unnecessary violence. And also, makes you think of black people in America during slavery time and Jim Crow, how white people would just violently come through and take things and kill people, unnecessary violence. And one incident in particular in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in the Greenwood district, which was also known as Black Wall Street, where, black people were thriving and they were independent and they were wealthy in their own community. And white people couldn't have this. So they violently came in and destroyed this town and, burned everything, killed people, and then took the land, basically took the land from the people. So we see these things still happening today, don't we? And God is not pleased with this kind of things. All right, and even, closer than that, we see this happen with, in our communities where rich corporations come in, small communities, and just buy up land for pennies on the dollar and, leave those towns, the people in those towns with nothing. So it still happens today. All right, then in verse 10 it says, "Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people and hast sinned against thy soul." So this verse is saying that the wicked one has sat down and consults with himself or thought about what he's doing, and even though he thought about it, he still thinks it's okay to do these things. Now what does that say about a person who could violently kill, destroy, and take things and think about it and still think it's okay to do it? What does that say about a person or people that do that? It's pure evil, isn't it? You just have to be evil to think about doing that, know that you're doing it, and be okay with doing it. That's pure evil. That's not of God. All right, so then in verse 11 it says, "For the stone wall shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it." So even the material that the house is made out of, the walls, the beam, the timber, they see this evil being taking place, right? They see it happening, and they've seen what has been done, and they can testify that's evil. But walls don't speak, do they? So but the old saying, "If walls could talk," applies here, because if walls could talk, the walls would probably tell these people that they're wrong, they're evil. All right, any comments about second outline? Destroyed by their own devices. All right, our third outline, God will get the glory, verses 12, 13, and 14. So here we have the third woe, and in the Hebrew, the word for establish is translated to mean to fix or establish. So verse 12 says, "Woe to him that buildeth a town with blood, and establish a city by iniquity." What is this verse saying? He's warning the person who did what? Does what? Build towns on violence and the shedding of innocent blood, and taking, again, what does not belong to you. And we see here that the cost of bloodshed and the profit from that sin, it built towns, it's built cities, because people, like we said before, they just took the land. They came through and destroyed it, killed people, and they profited on these things. And we hear so often nowadays that to make this country great again, this country was great because of the blood and that was shed by our forefathers that helped build this country. Other people, the people that they want to hold down, are the ones that built the country and made it great, but yet they want to make it great again. So it wasn't as great as you thought it was, because you felt like part of the people in this country are not as good as other people. But that's the kind of thing that God does not want to happen. And if you consider how long slavery did happen, it was hundreds and hundreds of years that slavery existed. You know those people were begging God, how long, God? When, God, are you going to come and make this right? When are you going to come and help us? And it was a long time. Hundreds of years is a long time to have to go through that. But he did come, didn't he? Eventually he came to free us from slavery. All right. All right, so in this verse, we're talking about the sin of, you may think about the sin of an individual person and what they do and the impact that it has. A lot of people think that the wrong that they do only affects them, but we've said before that sin don't just affect the individual that commits that sin. It affects other people. And when you think about these type of sins where they came in and destroyed towns or cities and took things and killed people, that sin was of a greater scope, wasn't it? It didn't just affect one or two individuals. It affected their entire community, countless people. And even today, the things that we see, the injustices that go on and things that happen, it may not happen to us as an individual, but it affects us as a community, doesn't it? So we have to, be aware of this. And again, we know Black History Month was just yesterday and prior, but that doesn't mean because February is over that Black History is over. So we as Black people have to do something. Sister Peggy Towns was here a few weeks ago and told us we have to do something. We can't just sit, and do nothing with what's going on. Somebody has to do something. All right, so then verse 13 says, "Behold, it is not of the Lord of hosts that the people shall labor in the very fire, and the people shall weary themselves for vanity." So this verse shows a promise that God made in it. He's promised that the wealth of the nation is going to turn to what? What happens from fire? What's the result of fire? Ash. So this is going to turn into ash. Everything that they did, it was done in vain anyway. And what does done in vain mean? If you do something in vain, what does that mean? No what? No good. Okay. So means done out of impurity, doesn't it? Excessive impurity. You didn't do it out of a pure heart. And so these things that they did was done in sin and iniquity, definitely not of a pure heart. So God says that these things are going to turn into ashes, going to be burned. And when you think about vanity and coveting things and wanting, what other people have or whatever, so much that you want to take it, you have to think of, well, if I was to gain this by taking it and it didn't belong to me, for me, let's just say somebody stole something. I know a couple times people tried to get me to buy something that was stolen. And, if you buy that thing, you're an accessory to that crime, aren't you? If you willingly buy something stolen, then you're accessory to that crime. You know it was stolen. So I must admit, when I was young, very young, I did buy something from somebody. And I knew it was stolen. And I don't think it lasted 6 months. So from that, I've learned that, it was ill-gotten. So it's not any good. It's really not going to do me any good. So shouldn't have gotten it that way anyway. But that's how, God sees what these people were doing, the wicked were doing. All right, so then in verse 14, again in verse 13, so also what God is saying is that there was nothing that they could do to stop this destruction either, right? There would be no way they could stop it, nothing that they could do to stop this. He had already set this plan in motion. We don't know what day, we don't know what time, but this is the judgment that God was going to cast down on the Babylonians and the Chaldeans. All right, so then verse 14 has the promise from God that one day there's going to be as much knowledge of him around the whole world as there is in the sea, isn't it? It says, for the earth shall be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So once God renders his judgment and he cleanses the land, then everybody's going to know who he is, aren't they? They're going to be aware of his power. They're going to know that he's God and he's in control of everything. And again, it may seem like he's slow, he's not there, he's not listening, but he knows the time. It's in his specified time that he's going to do whatever he sets to do, right? Not our time. All right, any comments about our third outline? Okay. So, we have to just trust that God is in control. We know he's in control, but we have to trust that he's working for our good, and we can't worry about what the president's doing. We can't worry about what other countries are doing. We can't worry about what our bosses, our managers, our co-workers are doing. All these things that we see when we see people doing things that are not right, and it may bother us. We still have to just trust, don't we? We really can't do anything else because we can't do anything about it. So we have to trust. We just have to pray and trust and ask God to, deliver us and know that he will one day. All right, so no other comments about the lesson? Let's look at the liberating lesson. It says, the theme of injustice has been a mainstay of American public discourse over the last decade, particularly as it relates to the violence experienced within blacks and brown communities, the murder of Trayvon Martin at the hands of an acquitted vigilante, and the countless cases of unarmed black women and men killed at the hands of law enforcement with painfully few convictions, have caused citizens and clergy to sing Habakkuk's song of lament. How long will this continue to go on? How long will we cry violence and God does not intervene? How long will God allow injustice to persist? The lesson of this text is that God is not asleep and God will ultimately get the glory. But God's people must use their power to speak against the systems of oppression and injustice to spark that desired change. And that's what we just said a few minutes ago. We are obligated to do something, aren't we? We're obligated to speak. We're obligated to stand up for any injustices that we see. A lot of times we may think that I'm just one person, I can't do anything. But if everybody did a little bit, and you put them all together, they make a lot, right? I heard somebody say the other day, if you put, we know our ability is limited, but if we put what we can do with what God can do, a lot can get done, can't it? All right. And back to the people saying, I'm just one person and I can't make a difference. And we know just this week that they were trying to do a economic boycott. So many people were saying, well, what's one day? It's just one day. But, you got to start somewhere, don't you? You start with one day and you're successful with one day, then it could grow into a bigger movement. So we have to make sure that we're not hindering the cause and we are being a part of the solution and not cause of the solution. All right, there is nothing else, then we will turn it back over to the superintendent. Do we have a volunteer to do the review? Bible dedication? Okay.
We thank you so much for being a part of our Sunday school this morning. We invite you to join us at 10:15 a.m. for baptism, worship, and Holy Communion service. We are so excited to celebrate the goodness of our God this morning, and we encourage you to be a part of our worship service. We look forward to seeing you at 10:15 a.m., and we thank you for being a part of our Sunday school this morning.